Welcome everybody. I think we'll make a start. Thank you for joining us today at this side event at the UN STI Forum, at the UN Science, Technology and Innovation Forum. This session is focused on Sustainable Development Goal 4, quality education, and how it interacts with science, technology and innovation. My name is Rebecca Hanlon and I'm the moderator for today's session. I am the Innovation and Development Specialist at the AfricaLix network. AfricaLix is a network, African network of researchers who investigate issues at the intersection of innovation and development processes. We are made up of economists, sociologists, political scientists, as well as engineers and agricultural and health specialists, amongst others. And we're passionate about building capacity in the field of what we term innovation studies in Africa. Innovation studies is a multidisciplinary field that grew out of questions about why different economies developed the way that they did. In Africa, the subject area has been focused not just on explaining patterns of economic growth and the role of innovation in explaining these patterns of economic growth, but it has also intrinsically been linked to questions of inclusion, equity, poverty, and increasingly issues of sustainability. It benefits as an interdisciplinary area or a multidisciplinary area from ideas in allied fields, including science studies and technology management, as well as organizational studies and regional geography, to name a few. The role of innovation in explaining economic development has become increasingly pertinent since the COVID-19 pandemic started, bringing into light or bringing into the spotlight questions that many of us in AfricaLix have been asking for some time about the role of local and the importance of local production capacity and capabilities, the role and function of linkages with external markets, and how to ensure small and medium-sized firms in the formal but also the informal sector can innovate and survive. The COVID-19 pandemic has also enhanced the importance of questions that we've been asking about the role of innovation for social inclusion, well-being and equity. While everyone is increasingly aware of the importance of innovation for economic and social development of societies and the need to take these lessons and build back better as we move on from the pandemic, unfortunately, in our field of study in Africa, it is hampered by a lack of opportunities for young researchers to focus their work in this area or even to hear about and become part of the community at all. A key issue is the lack of training and learning on the continent in the area of innovation studies. There are pockets of expertise within a few learning institutions on the continent, and as a result, I'm joined today and I'm very pleased to be joined today by Dr. Titileo Olaposi from one of the first teaching and learning centers on the continent in the field of technology policy, the African Institute for Science Policy and Innovation at Obafemi Awolowo University in Nigeria. We also have with us Dr. Diran Samoni, who is joining us from BITS Business School in South Africa, which is one of the few universities on the continent to have a dedicated master's degree of management in innovation studies. And we're also joined by Dr. Sean Cunningham, who joins me from the Trilateral Research Chair in Transformative Innovation, the Fourth Industrial Revolution and Sustainable Development at the University of Johannesburg, and is Professor of Practice there. So he comes to this debate not so much as an educator or a teacher or and a lecturer, but from someone who works with businesses. I have asked our three panelists today to join me in discussing how we can build more capacity through teaching and learning programs to conduct what I term research on innovation, or the study of innovation processes. And I contrast research on innovation with research in innovation, which I use to refer to the promotion of research and development in different science, technology, and engineering fields. And it's also where significant levels of attention are focused. at the expense of the social sciences field of studying innovation processes and the relationship between innovation processes and social and economic development. So with that introduction, and in order to keep to our 60 minutes, I would like to move directly into the roundtable discussion. I have asked each of the speakers to speak for just 2 or 3 minutes with some initial reflections on this topic, and then I will give them a chance to respond to each other, and then I will ask you to give questions and comments. Please write your questions and comments in the chat as we go along, and then we will read them out and ask the speakers to respond to them. We will do that after that first round of initial reflections, and then we will move into a discussion of 2 specific questions. The first one is, in what way can innovation studies research help us build back better from the effects of COVID? And the second question is, what's needed in the way of quality education to ensure research in innovation studies can help us build back better, and more importantly, respond to future shocks more effectively. So with that, I'd like to ask Dr. Dhiran Simoni if he would like to kick us off. Welcome, Dhiran.
Hi, Becky, and greetings to my co-panelists and to all the listeners. So the 2 questions are very important. I think the COVID-19 pandemic brought to our attention, just from a medical point of view, the importance of science and technology in informing us reliably about public health and informing us effectively about what remedies would be available, and then, of course, the vaccines that came about. And so we saw firsthand that science and technology and research in science, technology, and innovation were not just for their own sake. They had important implications for our survival, frankly speaking. And so that challenges us as an African-based community to say, well, COVID-19 is not the first pandemic in human history. There have been other pandemics before. There are ongoing epidemics in Africa, and there will be more to come. How can we, and then we have also endemic diseases and healthcare challenges. This is a reminder that if we do not build health resilient systems, this time around, it wasn't as bad as some of the experts predicted, but we don't want to depend on luck. We want to be prepared. So the challenge for us then is, how do we link science, technology, and innovation to society? Which leads me to the second part, and so there's a palpable reason for that, so that we can have resilient systems in case of a disaster in the future. And so why is it important to study that? So yes, we know we can study the sciences and engineering and mathematics at the university, or we can study the social sciences or the humanities, but innovation studies tries to link them. Now we talk about the 4th industrial revolution, but the 1st industrial revolution is now 3 centuries old. And so the fact is that we live in an industrial society. And so we need a knowledge of science and technology and a knowledge of society, a deep knowledge of society, what we want, what we aspire to. And innovation studies seeks to link them together. And so we have to study that too in order to do that effectively. So I think and maybe my closing comment on this point is to say that there's no doubt that an investment in science, technology, and innovation has a long-term effect on growth and development. This is established in neoclassical economics. 2 Nobel Prizes were given for that in 2018, one for growth and one for the effect of growth on climate change. So if you grow, you can't grow at the expense of the environment, innovation systems, social studies of science. So this is an established point of departure. The question for us then is, how do we reflect on this reality in an African context, and how do we both contribute to technological development, globally speaking, and of course, to satisfy our own needs. Thank you, Becky.
Siran. Titileo, can I ask you to go next?
Yeah. Yes, I'm online. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
we can. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I am from a university setting. We run a program for graduate students on technology management, and we have some units where someone can specialize. One of it is R&D and innovation management. Now, my own concern is in the area of creating awareness for innovation studies in African universities, or let me say, tertiary institutions of learning. We have a program, not innovation studies program, but innovation studies is within what we do. And all over Africa, we have a very few institutions that run innovation studies programs. So what concerns me most now is how to create awareness so that those of us that are running innovation studies program can attract more students, and those that are not yet having innovation studies programs can realize the importance of such programs and create innovation studies programs or develop curriculum for innovation studies. It is well known that innovation studies is very, very important. When Jiro was talking about developing maybe drugs or medicine for COVID-19 or other pandemic and things like that, we in our institute will be looking at the effects of such drugs that are developed. Like, it is known that any new technology will have side effects. We have to study the efficiency of such new technologies, the effectiveness of such new technologies. We have to study the impacts that such new technologies will be having. Although somebody can come up with a new drug, the drug may look effective, but what other effects is it having in the body of the patient, or maybe in the environment and things like that? So we have to embed that into our education. But first, like I said, my major concern is in the area of creating awareness for innovation studies programs and expanding the scope of such studies. Maybe later when we are answering some questions, we'll be mentioning some other things, like people not realizing the importance of innovation studies, people preferring to go into engineering disciplines. So, but for now, let me stop at what I've said: creation of awareness of the importance of innovation studies. Thank you.
Thanks, Titileo. Sean, would you like to come in?
Yes, Rebecca, I've changed what I wanted to say now 3 times, so let's see how it comes out. I want to start off with, we have to look, and I'm going to talk from a SADC perspective in the neighborhood that I know best. You know, one thing I want to start off with: what did COVID and the COVID response reveal about the system that we maybe didn't pay enough attention to before we had the pandemic? So maybe we should start right in the moment when the COVID lockdowns happened. I guess many of the speakers, participants here would know that in South Africa, we had a particularly restriction of movement and so on. And there were two feelings that business people had, and I work with business and with civil society and social structures like faith groups. And there were two feelings. The one feeling was everything is top down. So now we all have to trust a bunch of scientists and politicians, and we don't understand how they make recommendations and how they make decisions. So that was the one feeling, that it was a very rigid top down, you know, and I'm going to call it an innovation process, Rebecca, if you're okay with that. And at the same time, we had this challenge that locally, where we had to make decisions, where businesses and churches and community centers had to make decisions. We didn't have information, you know, we didn't have guidelines, we didn't have protocols, you know, so maybe just to put those two on a line, to say on the one side, we had a very strong top-down response, and at the other, at the same time, we didn't trust our communities to locally come up with solutions about how to space people and how to address this. That's the one thing. There's a second thing that the whole, and I want to again go back to COVID, because in the last 2 years, this has been something that I think has also changed our humanity and our connectedness. Up to, let's say, beginning 2020, when I worked on innovation systems and innovation studies, I always had a problem that everybody was either treating companies as a little magical black box in a big system, you know, so we really didn't know what was going on inside these businesses, but we had statistics about what they exported and what they used. And then we had innovation studies that was very focused on the inside of businesses, you know, with how to manage processes, how to improve you know, product and process efficiency and so on. What COVID and the lockdowns did, in my experience, this was a first. Businesses suddenly realized, but a lot of our people cannot work from home. They either cannot work from home because the infrastructure doesn't support that. And you all know I'm coming from South Africa, so we have a lot of people that maybe they have the qualifications, but the area where they live, you can't run, you know, is unequal. There's a lot of work from home because the environment is not secure. People that in this epidemic couldn't choose alternative public transport arrangements. So suddenly, these were problems. Before COVID, this was problems of the government. Businesses generally did not bother so much with you know, telecommunications infrastructure beyond the workplace and public transport beyond their immediate environment. And suddenly these things became important for business. So I want to connect back with the SDGs, Rebecca, that's on the logo there behind you. For the first time, I felt like companies have suddenly realized that not all their workers have access to healthcare, to reliable public transport, to alternative means of transport, and to alternative work arrangements. So for me, this was an interesting thing, because for the first time, it felt like businesses really felt like we have to do something about this. So I think that innovation studies also, we really need to connect what is happening on the inside of businesses with what's happening on the inside of society, and not work the whole time in these abstract models. So I think I'm just going to leave it there for a moment, but you know, it's clear to me that you can't use the innovation practices that works inside a firm to solve the problems of what is needed beyond the firms. And maybe business people thought that it would be very simple to solve these problems, and they realized in the end that maybe government officials don't have such an easy job after all, and that business has a valuable role to play. And I want to say business, but at the same time, I saw in some countries that churches, you know, people think of a church, any faith, as having a very singular role in a society, but many of these structures provide medical care, provide food distribution, provide very important local civil and social services. And in many of the countries where I'm working, government didn't see these kind of civil structures as playing a very particular role in the COVID response or in the building back better responses that came. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. I think that last point you made around innovation practices in firms being different from, or potentially being different from what the innovation practices needed in other parts of society is an interesting one, and goes back to the issues that Diran and Titileo brought up about what is innovation studies and what does it encompass and where does it fit in line with other subject areas. So Diran, would you like to come back on anything that your colleagues have said?
Yes, I think what Titileo and Sean have mentioned reflect what we might call two orientations in innovation studies. So in my introductory remarks, I suggested that roughly speaking is about how to connect knowledge and society, or science, technology, and society. So at the governmental level, the economics of innovation would say, well, if we invest in scientific R&D, what's the payback? By how much are we going to grow? So you have a community that's interested in the economics of innovation. How much do we invest and how much do we expect to get back? But as we know, we can have economic growth and that growth may not be inclusive. Or we can invest in science and technology and that investment may not have the desired outcomes. So we need to go to a more granular level to see how are those resources, those inputs deployed in organizations and in government agencies and in firms. And so Titileo, coming from a science policy background, would be trying to look at a governmental agency looking at the challenges in a particular society based on evidence. How can these investments in science, technology, and innovation address issues of water, sanitation, sustainable energy, and so on and so forth? So the program that I work in at WITS is Innovation Policy and Management, which is short for, it's the long form of innovation studies. And so we have a policy perspective. What does the state need to do? How should it invest in innovation? In what sectors? To what segments of society? In what ways? And then we have the management perspective that looks at the firm level, the firm broadly understood as, of course, a private organization, as Sean mentioned, but I very much like that you talked about nonprofit or even religious organizations that would function as firms because they have internal activities and strategies. And then, of course, even government agencies need to be effectively run internally in order to deliver the services that the public expects from them. So we work at that level. And there's also the STS community that you might say is a critical perspective on science and technology coming from the society, its history, its antecedents, its cultural and ethical preferences. And so you can come from different areas. And so we would be trying to connect Titileo and Sean in the context of the same master's program so that students can challenge each other, but also learn some of the same concepts so that when they go back into the world of practice, they can interact in a more collaborative and hopefully effective way rather than in a conflictual way because they don't understand each other. So that's an important role of innovation studies as education innovation studies in terms of shifting the needle in practice and society. Thank you.
Thanks, Diran. Titileo?
Yes, thank you very much. In my own view, connecting innovation studies to the STI, science, technology, and innovation to the society, we can say that emphasizing problem-solving approach in innovation studies is what we need. Problem-solving approach will take an engineer that wants to develop a new product to go first to the grassroots, or let's say to the end users, to find out what actually is needed, so that he or she will not just sit down in the laboratory and begin to design something that will not solve the problems of people. So if we are using problem-solving approach, the end users will be able to contribute even from the start, from idea generation. It may not even be the populace alone. It may even be the industry, because innovations that are developed for people to use, are developed for the industry to use. So if the developers of innovation have it in mind that from the outset, they have to carry along the end users, they will link up with the industry actors to find out what exactly they need. And during the process of developing innovation, they will still not be left out, so that they will be, to make sure that they are getting it right for them, they must have inputs into the development of the innovation. And after the completion of the development of the innovation, you know, what we do in our institute hinges more on this, to get feedback from the end users is very, very important towards developing effective and efficient innovation. We have to embed this into our education, into our curriculum. You know, going back to end users to get data, to get input to what we design, and to get feedback at the end of it, so that the innovation can actually meet the needs. Just investing on innovation is not sufficient. Getting infrastructure for innovation is not sufficient. But making sure that we do what is right, that we are solving problems, that we are giving people what they need, that is what we justify whatever is invested into the innovation. I would like to stop there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tilo. Sean?
Just two phrases that I want to pick up from my colleagues, Diran. I like that you use the word learn. You know, I get excited when I use this word. And I think in the context of an event that is about STI, I want, and probably everybody that's participating in this call knows about the other mode that is about to do, use, and integrate kinds of innovation. So I just want to connect that also with what Titalayo said about problem solving. I understand that there are certain problems that we need to go and define a problem, and that we need to run innovation, you know, as a process to come up with a design or a solution. And there are many problems in our continent that needs this, and we need more of this. But I want to also just highlight that through our education systems and through our innovation system studies, we really also need to look at how do we enable others to solve problems, to solve their own problems. How do we encourage people that have gone through the education system and maybe through a university to develop portfolios of experiments and to try other arrangements? I want to just stand up again and say that businesses and community structures, yes, they're the beneficiaries of some of our innovations, and they're the beneficiaries of some of our policies, but they themselves are also innovators, and we need to equip them and recognize this. I'm really passionate about that. It's not that I'm talking down on the importance of science and technology infrastructure, because these are often my clients and my friends, but I really want to also just highlight the fact that what we really short in so many places where I go are more people that are allowed, because let me just say something about some of the countries where I'm working. There are many problems where there's a stigma around if businesses try to solve problems there. Who is allowed to solve a problem in some of our African countries around health? around healthcare, or access to water, or water purification, or access to energy, or clean or green energy. There's a lot of these things where it's not entirely, it's frowned upon when civil structures, a local community or businesses or a group of business people, show an interest in that. And yet at the same time, we need more people to try things and experiment with things and try alternative arrangements. I'm really not encouraged when everything originates in a policy, because sometimes the policies work really well in the capitals and in the secondary cities, and then there's the rest of the country. So I just wanted to bring that in, and I'm not arguing for the one or the other. I'm just saying we must also pay more attention to this, the problem-solving approach that is not necessarily a research project or innovation project, but it is a response to a need inside or between organizations.
Thanks, Sean. I think that will lead to a very interesting discussion on how we can improve education to enable us to think differently about the way we think about innovation and the types of innovation that we should be promoting. We do have a lot of different comments in the chat already, and I do want to give everybody a chance to hear some of those. So we have a question, and I think during the responses that you've already been making, you've kind of answered this question already, particularly with regards to your last point, Sean. So one question was, how do you involve marginalized communities in innovation? There was a second question or comment about the importance of how questions and asking how questions to enable innovation studies to have a practical focus, which I think talks to Cecileo's point around the importance of problem-solving approaches. We have another comment in the chat about the focus on innovation studies versus innovation policy, and whether there should be more policy orientation and study and teaching of what innovation policy is and the importance of policy for science, technology, and innovation. Then we have a question about models to get more end users involved. What models could we use? And then we have a number of other comments regarding co-creation and the usefulness of the term, or the differentiation between doing, using, and interacting type innovation and learning, and science, technology, and innovation. And I think it's worth us remembering as well that Africa, it comes out of a tradition that doesn't just focus on innovation, but also on learning and competence building systems, which is very much focused on knowledge and different types of knowledge, and recognizing that everyone has knowledge to contribute to the process of innovation, and that it's about building those opportunities for linkages and enabling the flows of communication between different actors in the innovation process. And then I think we have nothing else that I haven't seen, unless Moses, who's in the background, do we have any comments on the forum, the UN STI Forum platform? I'm taking the silence as a no. So, Duran, do you have any comments on any of the questions or comments received? Just very, very briefly. You don't need to respond to all of them.
Okay. So maybe I can take the question about the need for science policy in innovation studies. I think there are some programs that mainly outside Africa that still focus on science policy narrowly. And in fact, maybe I can say that the innovation in education that's needed is that while in, let's say, the industrialized world, you would have a master's or PhD program in science policy, you would have one in innovation strategy, you would have one in technology management. And so the countries that we look up to in terms of industrial development, they all do this, right? And have done that for a long time. So this is nothing special. It's just that Africa needs to do it in a way that's appropriate for us. So when I say when I address the question about embedding science policy studies and innovation studies, what I think that says to me is that everyone, or as many people as possible, should be policy informed. As Becky said, we're not teaching people how to innovate. We're training people how to manage the innovation process. So people innovate every day by solving problems in their immediate environments. But some of those solutions that are promising need to be mainstreamed. But the individual or the firm who solved that problem in the immediate environment doesn't have the knowledge, the capacity, the resources to scale them up. So what we would do is go and ask people and study, as part of our studies, our research, what do you do? How do you solve this problem? Based on what resources? So we would see how people with university degrees solve those problems and how people without any kind of formal schooling might solve those problems. And we would formulate policies that address those. But being policy informed, and so maybe this is where I'll close my point, is that you can be in government and not necessarily be motivated. So there's a bureaucratic approach to innovation management, and then there's the motivation to achieve a certain goal and actually achieve it and network on that common basis. So the innovation system is about bringing together actors who are commonly motivated, whether it be by profit or by sustainability or whatever. And so a policy-informed innovation manager, even in a private sector setting, is informed by the needs of the society and therefore addresses their firm-level innovation management approaches to addressing broader problems of that community. So that's the way in which I would say science policy plays a role. It's by making every individual a policy-informed, every innovation manager, a policy-informed manager, a policy-informed person who can intervene irrespective of what organization they actually sit in. That's one way perhaps to look at it. Thanks.
Thanks, Diran. Tituleo, do you want to come in with anything?
Yes, thank you very much. Diran has just spoken on one side of the coin, policy-informed innovation management. The other side of the coin that interests me is that research outputs from innovation management studies should provide evidence to policymakers. You know, policy making should be based on evidence. So in other words, I'm saying they should be making evidence-informed policies. And this could be obtained from researchers on innovation. So we are not just interested in making people policy informed, but we are interested in providing data that policymakers could work on. You know, when there is empirical evidence to form building block for policy formulation, such policies could not err. They will be effective. They will be easy to implement because already the researchers have worked, they have collected the data from the society. And it is another way of linking STI to the society by providing evidence for policy making. Thank you.
Thanks, Tituleo. Sean?
I want to just for a moment be a little bit contradictory and say we need better policies and we need better evidence for policies. But there's also a little bit of a pushback that I'm sensing in many countries where people don't trust evidence and they don't trust scientists and experts anymore. This is, I mean, we're definitely seeing this. I don't want to even mention countries, but we're seeing this in the USA. We actually, COVID has led to this process where people question science and evidence quite a bit. So we have to maybe also, I don't know how we would define always evidence, but one thing that I'm stunned by is in many of the countries where I'm working, because often in my work, I move between institutions and I move between businesses, so I would move between a university and the industries and the local community. And the interesting thing is that there's a lot of data and a lot of information out there that isn't recognized as evidence or as facts. It's just, so maybe what we should also do is beyond evidence, because I mean, there are certain things that we definitely need evidence for. We also need to really focus on the relationship between these different institutions and the roles that they play in the system. Actually, I'm traveling at the moment, and I'm working in a country where we have the problem that there are more than 60 organizations that we can find that somehow working on science and technology and innovation policy, or technology transfer, or technology extension, or modernization of agriculture. We have one of everything, but they don't talk to each other. And all of them have data sets and insights that somebody else could find useful. But the costs of coordinating them is just too high. And that's a problem that we see in so many of our countries. We have amazing organizations, but they work with a main funder and they work with a small constituency, and they have very little incentive to cooperate with somebody that is very different from them. So sorry, I've now twisted the question a little bit.
Not a problem at all, Sean. And we're, I realize that we haven't got to the two questions yet directly, but we have been indirectly answering them as we go along. So I think this is all good. So we have another couple of questions. I think one of them segues nicely into the first question. And that question was, how can we ensure policies and research are used? And that links very nicely to the first specific question that we had for this session, which is, in what way can innovation studies research help us build back better from the effects of COVID? And I think that you have all mentioned in different ways the way that can happen, the importance of reflecting on policy, bringing in researchers and other stakeholders, end users, being problem-based, looking at DUI, using and interacting, and different forms of knowledge. But is there anything else we could be doing? Any other particular areas of research that we should be focusing on? Let me start with Diran.
Okay, so I think one missing area in innovation studies in Africa, for sure, is a sense of urgency, right? So we're talking about the SDGs. We're talking about SDG 4, so education for innovation. But if you look at SDG 7, that says that by 2030, everyone in the world should have access to universal sustainable energy, universal access to sustainable energy. And sub-Saharan Africa anyway stands at about, let's say, 50%, maybe 45%. And we have 8 years to go to 2030. And the data suggests that the increase in access to energy is 1 percentage point every year. So we are increasing. So this year is 45%, next year will be 46, next year will be 48%, and so on and so forth. But by 2030, we'll only be about 55% energy access. So it's not just about improving energy access, it's doing that at a fast enough rate that we can meet certain sustainable development goals in a reasonable time horizon. And there's a different kind of orientation to that sense of urgency. So that's one important topic. The second one is what I think some of our participants asking, who is going to do it? So that 1% increment that I'm suggesting has been done by the state predominantly, which sets up energy infrastructure. And the same applies for water, sanitation, roads, and so on and so forth. But it's the state. So we know what the state can do based on data from 30 years ago. it's not nothing, but it's not enough to reach the goals that we seek in the time horizon that we've set. So we need a more inclusive approach to policy making. So this is why I was mentioning the policy-informed actors. The private sector may be interested narrowly in profit, but we need to get them to expand the scope of their objectives. Nonprofit organizations may have a narrow goal, and so on and so forth. And so we need to expand the pool of policy actors or policy-informed actors who can enable us to reach these goals at a faster rate. So my closing comment is the notion of economic catch-up receives hostility in the African setting because of its traditionally narrow focus on growth. But if we talk about inclusive catch-up, saying we need to do some of these things better and more importantly, faster. We need to achieve universal education. We need to achieve universal literacy. And we need to do that really quick. I think that may force us to, or may challenge us to look for the most effective solutions and the most likely actors to do those within a time horizon that makes sense, Anyway, so that would be my contribution. Thank you.
Thanks, Tiran. Titileo, anything to add?
Yes, thank you very much. I think that question focuses on how innovation studies research can help us build back better from the effects of COVID-19. If we are going to have effective research, we must first understand what are the effects of COVID-19. From the context of Nigeria, it is well known that hunger is the major effect of COVID-19. Unemployment and maybe malnutrition. So if we understand what the effect of COVID-19 is, we have to tailor our research towards solving the problem. How do we meet these needs? For example, I'll use the case of Nigeria. Nigerian government realized that hunger is the major effect of COVID-19. And they tried to help people, to provide assistance through money transfer and food assistance. But it was found that most of the money that were transferred did not get to the real target of that program. And most of the people that are actually hungry did not get the food. Now, how do we solve this problem? Researchers can work on that to find out how, in future, how government can reach out to people that are deprived, that need help, instead of wasting resources. When money is invested in a lot of things like this, and it does not solve the problem it's intended to solve, it's a problem. So I'm saying, in essence, that innovation studies research should look at what the problem is, define the problem well. When the problem is well defined, then research will be able to solve the problem. Then another thing I would like to talk about is that COVID-19 is a great challenge. And because of that, it needs collective effort. It needs collaborative effort. It is not what an organization can just sit down and say, we want to do research. No, all of us have to work together. It should involve different actors. It's like, I'm talking about something like open innovation. Let people bring their knowledge. Let us share knowledge. Let us all work together. Let us compare ideas. Let us compare our research processes, and let us see how we can solve the problem that is facing the global community. It's not just one continent or one country. So I am recommending that to solve the problem of COVID or any pandemic that will surface in future, we have to make innovation open. All hands have to be on deck. We have to interact, industry, academia, everybody, even the illiterates that are experiencing effects of COVID, have to contribute. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cicero. I'm getting a list of different things, which is important, and we will be writing up the key messages from today's session. So far, I've got the issue of, in terms of how can innovation studies research help us build back better? I've got the issue of problem focused, becoming more problem focused and focused on issues that are related to the SDGs, and the urgency, and recognizing the urgency of those issues and the problems that society is facing. The second thing is the inclusion of all actors and acceptance of different ideas and ways of working. And the third area, and this relates to some of the comments that we're getting in the chat, is issues of trust, politics and power, and the politics of innovation and how innovation happens. And then the fourth issue still is this relationship between practice and policy and how they interact. Sean, do you want to come in with any further thoughts?
I want to just highlight, I think in innovation studies, what we should also focus on more is to help formulate alternative proposals, alternative suggestions. I think that sometimes we come across with a very strong message, like there's one best way to do something, and we have to recognize that maybe a local or maybe a regional or maybe a different kind of organization or different community would want to address this in a different way. So I know that with a strong focus on inclusion, we try to please everybody, but maybe we must also recognize that some constituencies might have different priorities and that they might need alternative arrangements. And this could include, also paying more attention. What drives me crazy sometimes is when I'm told we should do this because it worked in Germany. It's Germany is a different context where everybody speaks the same language more or less. It's not like any place I know in Africa where we have such amazing diversity, even at the level of communities or sub-regions in a country. So I want to really focus on, firstly, allowing ourselves to say there are alternative arrangements and they have different merits. And there's different evidence to support these different alternative arrangements. And then if we are going to be inclusive, to also pay attention to the fact that we also have different constituencies that might not all be covered by what we are doing. I want to, just in a last word, respond to trust. Trust is earned, and trust is earned also over time. And so maybe we should also sometimes realize that to be trusted as a scientist or to be trusted as a policymaker, it happens over time when you stay with what you come up with, and you can also adapt to what doesn't work. And what we all know is that in so many of our countries, policies are made, plans are launched, and then when things don't work, nobody's willing to acknowledge that. And that destroys trust. And science has a role to play in that, in also saying, maybe we used the wrong measures, maybe we used the wrong frameworks or the wrong, maybe we used the wrong priorities. To just the whole time say that it's because people didn't understand our brilliance, it doesn't build trust.
Thanks, Sean. So we have 5 minutes left, and we haven't touched specifically on the second question, but we have, in the sense that we've discussed the need to change the way we teach and we learn about innovation and specifically innovation studies, including issues around the policy processes, through improved focus on problems, a more inclusive approach, bringing in different voices to teaching. Final word from each of you on how we could transform innovation studies education to enable us to be more responsive to future shocks as they occur. Diran.
So I think we need depth. So those who are interested in the discipline, and it's a postgraduate course, which means you've done other things. So we need depth that addresses, critically addresses how we can solve problems, as my colleagues have said, but we need breadth too. We need to pop into different faculties and different communities and roll out these insights in different ways, as short courses, as electives, and really spread innovation education in an inclusive way, and including policy actors, state actors, and firms. And so we need, and Africa Lakes, I think, is a challenge that we do well with depth, but we need more breadth so that people get a little bit of something that resonates when they face challenges. So that would be my recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Diran. Tizalera?
Thank you very much. Yes, I want to go with Diran that let me say we need more awareness creation, like I said at the beginning, for people to know the importance of innovation studies. It is not just for a program like we have in our institute like that. We should have seminars, frequent ones, especially for the engineers. I have a passion for the engineers. They should not be working independently. They need the knowledge of innovation, development, management, innovation processes, management. They have to be aware of how to really carry out this. Like I always say that engineers develop invention. They don't develop innovation. They need the knowledge of how to transform invention to innovation. Because if you are going by Schumpeter's submission, invention does not become an innovation until it is commercialized. So they need certain, they need to be trained. They need certain trainings. They need innovative capability development, the scientists, the engineers. So we have to be doing more seminars, workshops, even to bring in the policy makers, people in the ministry, so that they will understand all these things we are talking about. Most times when we provide evidence, they may not even make use of it because they don't understand the importance of what we do. There is no time. I would have talked about certain experience that we have. Our colleagues will be asking us, what do you do? We don't understand what you do in your institute. Your institute, you are not producing any products, because to them, innovation is a product development. But if we go to an extra mile to teach them, to educate them what we do, they will be able to appreciate what we do, and we'll be able to attract more learners, more researchers into innovation studies. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tizalera. Sean, final comments?
I want to urge everybody to also have a little bit of fun with innovation. Something that I often feel quite frustrated by is in a company that's dominated by engineers, a lot of development and innovation is very incremental. And for instance, when you take a biologist or a chemist and you put them down in that company, what biologists and chemists often understand is you need to do multiple experiments at the same time and then compare results. Engineers typically don't innovate that way. And you can go and say from social sciences, social scientists, if they want to understand something, they do research. Many manufacturers have no idea how to do that. So I think just if we talk about what educators can do, we can also cross-pollinate ideas between these different domains, and not assume that engineering companies need engineering technology, and companies drawing from social scientists need more humanities. Like, what do we learn from the law? Law is developed by vigorous debate, where people disagree so that the spit flies, and then afterwards they drink a beer together. So I think that we must also, as innovators, we must be careful not to get stuck into the domain where we come from, because I think that many of the challenges that we face as a humanity is exactly in the fact that a single domain and a single science, a single discipline, have only certain answers that will most likely lead only to incremental and maybe every now and then a little leap. So, but I want to just close by saying we also have to have fun with this. And I want to urge everybody that's participating to not wait for somebody else, but to ask the question, how can I improve the innovation system or the social system right from the organization that I'm working in, without waiting for a policymaker to declare a 11th commandment, or to, I just want to say we can also do some of these things in the policy voids that we are in. So maybe that's controversial, but thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Sean. And I think finishing on that note of asking us all to have a role and to pass on this message is very important. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody for participating today. As I said, there will be a write-up available of the events, and we will also have the recording available for you to rewatch should you wish, or to share with colleagues who have been unable to attend today. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our speakers today for a very wonderful, vibrant and varied discussion. We've covered an awful lot of points, but I think it's given us some good food for thought. And I look forward to continuing these discussions on how we can embrace more innovation studies, education, training and learning across the continent. So thank you very much. And please do remember that there are other sessions happening at the UN STI Forum, and I encourage you to look at the program and visit other sessions as they occur. So thank you very much. Have a good day, and look forward to seeing you all next time.